I'm the president of the local League of Women Voters Pine Belt and the co-president for the League of Women Voters of Mississippi. The League of Women Voters is over 100 years old. It is a nonpartisan organization whose mission is threefold. One, to register voters, and we've been doing it here in the Pine Belt almost on a weekly basis. It's second, to get out the vote, which is what we're working on now. And third is to do what we're doing tonight, to try to inform the public and ourselves on the issues of the day, to improve our community and to help the legislators. We are also joined when we work here in the Pine Belt by other nonpartisan groups who have tables outside and who are here today. The Forrest County NAACP and Mississippi Votes are viable organizations that work hard to do the three programs also. And we work many, many times together. And by working together, our numbers are affecting, so far, the legislators. And we'd be happy to see any of you join us. The League of Women Voters of Mississippi and the University of Southern Mississippi have prepared this forum on early voting. Mississippi is one of three states that does not have early voting. We have absentee voting. You have to give a reason why you can't come vote. But early voting means that it just works for you, and it gets you out, be better ability to vote. And that's what we're going to talk about tonight. We have with us here tonight three panelists. We have at the far, Christy Kayser, she's University of Southern Mississippi Director for the Center for Community Education. We have Dr. Troy Gibson, University of Southern Mississippi Associate Professor of Political Science at the School of Social Science and Global Studies. And Johneice Dupree, our Forrest County, Mississippi Election Commissioner, District 2. This is a panel discussion. This is going to be hopefully a conversation for all of us to educate ourselves. The panelists will be answering questions. You will see the questions on the slides, and after they have answered the questions, then the audience, you have index cards in front of you. If you want to ask a question, we'll be asking a question then. This is an effort, this is not like a formal event. This is an event to learn. If you have a question, it's going to benefit us because voting is how we have a democracy, and it's so important to fight for. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Daniel Riegel. I am an Assistant Dean of Students here at Southern Miss. I am also the advisor for the Student Government Association. I just want to echo Peg's sentiments. Thank you all so much for coming here. Thank you all for participating in this town hall tonight, and we look forward to seeing your questions. But without further ado, I'd like to turn over to our panelists and start with our first question of what is early voting? Any and all who would like to respond? Just a 1,000-foot view for us.
I can take a stab at that. So again, I'm Christy Kayser. I'm the director of the Center for Community Engagement here on campus, and we have been doing a lot of voter registration and education here on campus. And so early voting is essentially being able to show up somewhere to vote in advance of the election. For whatever reason. It's different than in-person absentee voting, which is what we have here in Mississippi, which there are criteria for which you have to go vote. And so early voting, it depends, the locations can vary in different states. They do about where you go vote. It also varies on how you vote, whether it's electronically or paper ballot. But here in Mississippi, it is in-person absentee voting is what we do.
I'll just add that in the political science literature, studies that examine the causes of early voting, the impact of early voting, they tend to classify early voting much more broadly, just simply any legal vote that's cast prior to the election day, which would include absentee ballots, mail-in ballots, but also in-person voting. And so, and the type of early voting that takes place can have different results, but that's how it's typically studied, is just to classify it broadly as any vote that's legally cast prior to election day.
So, good evening, and thank you, Peg, for inviting me. I am Johneice Dupree. I'm the election commissioner for Forrest County District 2. I just was elected in November, and I started this job in January, so I'm still learning. But I tell you, early voting in Mississippi is if a person is going to be out of the county on election day, they will be able to go to the circuit clerk's office and vote early. Now, in some states, you don't have to have a reason. You just want to go in and cast your vote early. But that's not the case with Mississippi. You have to have an excuse. You have to have a reason. Perhaps you'll be working on election day out of town, and you want to go ahead and vote early. So that's what early voting is. And you have to go to the circuit clerk's office Monday through Friday between 8 and 5. And of course, the 2 Saturdays prior to the election, the clerk's office will be open from 8 to 12, and you can go and early vote then.
Wonderful, thank you so much. What has changed in the last 2 years that has elevated this discussion to the forefront for the public and the legislature?
I can say something to that. It's just in the last few years, there seems to be more of a national debate about whether the requirements for voting should remain what they are, even made tighter because of a concern over voter fraud or voting errors, ballot mistakes on the one side, and on the other side, there's a concern over relaxing voting requirements, registration requirements, and so on because of a fear or a concern about voter suppression or the difficulty with which it is to vote in especially some states, and one of those would be Mississippi. I think it's a current event.
Absolutely. Where is Mississippi in comparison to other states regarding voters' access prior to election day? Are we aligned with most other states in the country? And the follow-up would be why or why not?
I know the answer to that. You go ahead.
I don't think I know the answer to that, but I do know in some states you're able to vote early, like I said, without having to have a reason to vote. And I think Mississippi needs to really look at that because a lot of times people just want to go ahead and vote and get it out of the way, but they're not able to do that. And it forces us to lie. You know, we're going to be out of town. Whereas if we were just able to go in and vote, we could I just want to vote early. I just want to go ahead and cast my vote.
Absolutely, thank you. What are some of the reasons that Mississippi doesn't have early voting? And what are your thoughts on these objections?
So I believe there's a lot of reasons that have been given in the legislature. I know that it was debated, I believe, in like 2017, and then again discussed during the pandemic in 2020. And I think some of the concerns definitely have to do with cost, which I think we have a question about a little bit later, and just the complexity of it. But I think also some of the objections have to do with the reason why this is coming to the forefront is because of what happens when those votes are cast early. Where do they sit? And how are they secure? And then also there is a concern sometimes that if votes are cast early and then something changes in the election cycle, something comes out about a candidate, then that voter might have changed their mind. And so I know that that's been given as a concern too. What are my thoughts on these objections? I think that provisions can be made to make votes secure, and I think that, you know, the changes that might happen in a voter's opinion are just a risk that might need to be taken. I still think that the benefits outweigh the disadvantages.
Absolutely. And if you would like, this would be an appropriate time to address those some of those funding issues that you discussed, if you wanted to.
I mean, the question was about why Mississippi.
Correct. What are some of the reasons why
Yeah.
Mississippi? What are some of the legislative pushback we've had?
Yeah, I mean, costs are probably one of the reasons why Mississippi it's a relatively poor state in terms of revenue. So costs is, you know, that's not the highest budget priority to expand voting mechanisms in a poor state. It's not probably a surprise that several other poor states have more restrictive, or not restrictive, but it makes it harder to vote early. But that's not completely true. And then many of the statements that we just heard are, you know, they're legitimate concerns about early voting introduces a higher incidence or a higher chance for there to be voting mistakes. More hands touch the ballot, more storage time touches the ballots. It's just more human error so there's legitimate reasons, but it doesn't stop a lot of other states, most other states, from allowing early voting. Probably the more apt reason for why Mississippi doesn't allow early voting as well as other states is because of its political culture. Daniel Elazar described Mississippi and a lot of other southern states as traditionalist cultures. Traditionalist cultures have a kind of allergy to change. They're suspicious of change for both. I mean, those can be good reasons. Change isn't always necessarily good, but it isn't necessarily bad either. It's just a different psychological bent towards change, and probably you've got to think that one of the major reasons why Mississippi is resistant to early voting is because the parties know who is more likely to vote early, Democrats or Republicans. And we just know Democrats are more likely to vote early than Republicans are. That's been found time and time again. And Republicans control the state legislature and they control the governor's mansion, and so they probably don't want that to change. By the way, when early voting first started, it was exact opposite.
Yeah.
So in Oregon, for instance, Republicans were asking for early voting in rural counties, and the Democrats there didn't want early voting. They cited all the same reasons. You know, it's going to create more voter fraud and so on. So you can't discount all the legitimate concerns are important, but you can't discount the partisan effects in the debate as well.
Absolutely. Thank you for sharing. If Mississippi does extend early voting to all eligible voters without exceptions, how much of an increase in participation could we expect to see? Could we expect to see any societal shifts resulting from this?
Perhaps we would, if people were able to go ahead and vote early. Perhaps we could see an increase in the voter turnout. Because a lot of times people are afraid to go and vote. I don't want to go down there because somebody might see me in town on election day, so I'll just wait. And then if it's cold on election day, if it's raining on election day, they might not go. So if they're able to go at will, I think that would increase the voter participation.
I bet you can speak to students.
Yeah.
I'll just say that the Michael McDonald, who's probably the leading researcher on this at the University of Florida, has consistently found, at least in recent years, that there is a tiny little bump in turnout rates for states that have early voting, controlling for other relevant factors. There seems to be a little bit of an increase in turnout, but it's really among particular groups: Democrats, independents, women, single parents, and it doesn't really affect the other groups all that much. And so again, that kind of shows you, you can kind of figure out who's for and against it based on how the results turn out.
I think that there would have to be a really large complementary education effort in order for us to actually see a bump in early voting, because, and I mean, I speak kind of from the work I've done with students and just trying to educate them on how to vote also. I mean, these are first-time voters, many of them, and so they are learning the process for the first time. And we mentioned earlier that Mississippi's voting process is pretty complicated. And so telling them about absentee, voting by mail, and the fact that they're gonna have to get, two documents notarized when they don't even know what a notary is, they certainly don't know who a notary is, that is just a lot of jargon for them to learn, different processes that they have to learn. And so if early voting was made accessible to them, we would still have to be making sure that they were aware of that. And beyond that, where would they go? Because again, with college students, a lot of times they're not leaving campus, and this is not their hometown sometimes, and so they are not familiar with different areas of town. Now, one of the things that I'm encouraging right now is with college students who did not get registered here in Hattiesburg but are registered where their parents live, I'm encouraging them to early vote, absentee, in-person voting, and to go back home and go vote at their circuit clerk's office. But again, that's a trip home that they have to make right in the middle of the semester, especially, they're living on ramen a lot of times, so that's extra gas money. So, I think that having the option to early vote here would be helpful if they were registered here, but it would have to have a complementary educational effort as well.
Thank you for your insight. Moving on to the next question. Are there any surveys or polls that tell us what voters want in Mississippi about early access to voting?
I've done that.
Has anyone heard anything anecdotally?
The one thing that I've heard is just kind of, I think one of the reasons why the legislature decided to not take it up as an issue in 2020 was they did not think that there was a whole lot of interest. They were not hearing from their constituents that this was something that people wanted. And so that is very anecdotal. Again, there's reasons why they might say that, but it also, if we do want to advocate for early voting, it also brings up how important it is that we make sure that we're talking to our legislature about it, so that they're aware of what the needs and the wants and wishes are of the Mississippi population.
Wonderful, thank you.
I'll make one comment. They're not Mississippi, but polls usually show that there is a weak preference for early voting. By a preference, I mean that most voters say they would like that to be an option. It's weak because it doesn't seem to, when they ask follow-up questions like, is this going to affect whether you vote or not, the answer is no. People who want to vote find a way to vote.
Thank you for sharing. And now this will be our last prepared question for the evening. So if anyone does have any questions that you would like to ask, please go ahead and start writing those down on your note cards now, and we'll come up and collect those in just a minute. Our final prepared question: students have the ability now to vote by absentee. How would expanded early voting impact students and the potential for them to become more engaged?
I will add on to kind of what I talked about earlier, which is that if the process was longer, so right now they don't have, they're realizing now that it's too late to request an absentee ballot by mail, and so they're realizing that the only option they might have is either travel to their home on voting day or to go early vote in their hometown. There's only 2 weekends that are available, and that's most likely when they would go. If we could expand the amount of weekends, possibly that might help them But I also will just say that anytime you can simplify a process, that's gonna get students more engaged. That's gonna get everyone voting more. And I know that there's concerns about security and everything like that, but we live in a society where a lot of things are done online now, and where we have answers at our fingertips that are very easy to understand. The voting process is not easy to understand, and voter registration is not online. I think if that changed, we would see a lot more engagement from students.
So if a person wants to go in and vote early, they can't go down to the circuit clerk's office. There's an early vote, and then there's an absentee vote. If an elderly person chooses to vote by absentee, they can call the circuit clerk's office and have a ballot mailed to them. But it is difficult because you have to sign over the flap, and there's so many things that you have to do. I wish that it was much simpler, because people are elderly and they don't really understand a lot of times. And I know sometimes when they will vote, you know, if you tell them to write over the flap, and then whoever's helping them would have to say, you know, just draw a line over the flap, and that lets the people at the clerk's office know that it has not been tampered with. That's the reason why. That's the reason why you have to vote over right over that line. But if a person is disabled, they could request an absentee ballot, but then you'd have to get a notary to come in to notarize. So it is complicated, but it would be better to me, I think, if a person can go down and vote absentee at the clerk's office, because then they will do all of that. Okay?
Wonderful. Thank you very much for sharing. Okay, at this time, if you would, go ahead and hold up your note card if you have a question. I'm going to collect them.
I don't have a question, I have a statement. Person
You know what?
65 and over can vote early without an excuse.
Yes.
Correct.
That is
But
their
that is the
excuse.
excuse.
Well, I don't deem that to be. an
I agree, but
excuse.
when,
I just
yeah.
believe that to be icing on the cake. And y'all didn't mention that, but if you're 65 and over, you don't have to make up an excuse.
Exactly.
That's
You
right.
can just go in and
And
vote.
vote.
Yeah.
If you're gonna be out of town.
Or that's the absentee out of town thing.
Yeah.
Okay, and we have one more person who just wants to make a statement.
You want me to make a statement about it?
Oh, yeah, you can make a statement.
I have several statements. When someone, I actually ran for Secretary of State one time. When someone votes early and then shows up on election day, the early vote is not counted. So that throws away this thing about discrepancy about voting and who voted, who didn't. If you vote absentee, and you can call it absentee, you can call it mail-in, whatever you want to call it. It's early voting, and if you vote early and show up that day to vote, it is discarded. It is not counted. 47 states offer early voting, plus DC. Mississippi, Alabama, and New Hampshire, I believe, are the states that do not require. And there are states that offer it 7 days before election, and there are states that offer it more than 7 days for the election. Students would vote more, I think, if Mississippi would allow online registration. If it was allowed. When I was running there, I received a letter from a young lady who was a student at Mississippi State. She said she had registered 30 individuals, and if we would allow online registration, she could register 300. Again, simplifying the task of finding out where do I register, where do I go there, where do I vote after I register. It's too complicated. The statement from Secretary of State was that you put too much pertinent information online. Well, you ever fill out an application for a credit card? Online banking? It's all, I mean, they got it, they know who you are and where you are. And lastly, and I'll be through. And I think y'all already said this. In Mississippi, early voting is not an easy task. allow early voting and some other things. I think early voting is just part of the problem. Not allowing people to vote on Saturday, not allowing people, if Mississippi would change, it could allow early voting, I think it would increase the percentage of people who would vote. And the reason why it doesn't rise to the top, because people who vote, vote. Those are not the people we're worried about. These are people who don't vote. Those are people who want it. They're the people who vote. I guarantee you, nobody in this room has missed 2 votes over the last 15 years.
And we're gonna go to questions, but I just wanna say that I agree that when we have early voting, if nothing else, we are increasing our option, keep increasing the idea that more people are going to vote.
Yeah, and look, when you go knock on doors and you have early voting and someone says, I don't know if I'm going to vote or not, you say, we can go today. Put them in your car and guess what? They go vote. If, like my wife said, if you can't do that, then you lying when you go there, I'm gonna be out of time. Well, that's a lie. But it increases the opportunity of getting people to the polls.
That's okay. So I'm gonna go ahead.
Well, to that point, 2 of these questions I think can be married together. One, if cost is a reason not to early vote, why do 47 states have it? And then also, should we also push to establish national standards for federal elections?
I can speak to the first one. I mean, just the 3 states that we mentioned there, Alabama, Mississippi, and New Hampshire. New Hampshire's not poor,
No.
but they spend much less on their state government than we do. They only meet, state legislature only meets every other year.
Yeah.
They're not even hardly paid. There's just, so it's not just the demographic of poverty that affects the cost. It's what they take in revenue and spend out in revenue. And those 3 states are relatively poor in terms of expenses from the state government. So there is a connection there. I still don't think that's a sufficient reason to avoid it if it's a good idea to do, but there is something to that. It's not like it's just 3 random states. These are states that have very small revenue and very small output.
Has anybody done a study related to the cost? I mean, that sounds like a really good study for some assistant professor to do.
Well, I'm an associate, so I'll let somebody.
That's why I said assistant. But a study to show, like, this is what it cost before early voting, and this is what it costs now. What's the difference? Where does that?
That study may
What is
exist.
the cost of early?
Where is that?
Early voting. What are the expense of early voting? I'm going to vote early. I'm going to go to the clerk's office, drop off my ballot. What's the expense?
Can I have?
I can bring
I've
me
also
into that.
known the board of supervisors pay for elections. Early voting, in my expectation, would reduce costs. Why am I saying that? First of all, we only have 3 million people or less in Mississippi. And the percentage of people who vote is less. Of the voting age population is less. You allow early voting, you have people who work in the circuit clerk's office 40 hours a week. They can take those votes in the entire week, 2 weeks, 45 days before the election. They can take that. Then my wife and other election commissioners would not have to find so many people to work on election day and pay them. The cost would be decreased. That's a farce. We're in a state that, as you said, is politically motivated because it has changed from one group saying we really like it, and now we don't like it so much. And other groups saying, well, we like it now. That's the problem.
And I think the argument about cost, does not necessarily take that idea into consideration. It's usually about opening new locations where people can go early vote, or placing electronic machines in places where people can go vote. And so I think that largely is where kind of that argument about cost comes. But I think if you are a small state, a small state like that, where you're not going to have a ton of people responding, then that is something that could potentially be handled by the circuit clerk's office.
And you need less machines.
And you would, yeah.
So there you go.
goes to the circuit clerk. Are these people taking in the early voting, are they paid more? Like, I know they get off at 4, but like, from your daily job, they have to do a lot already. I'm from a culture, the young culture, we get off, once we done for the day. And you not paying me more, I'm gonna work overtime. So are these people, is the cost more towards them staying overtime, them kind of the balance? I don't know how any of that works. Like, where's this cost coming from? Because if they're still doing the same job, they're counting the votes for the same amount of hours, I don't understand the cost wise. Is it the processing? Where is the cost coming from?
I mean, it's another level of collecting the ballots, another level of counting the ballots, storing the ballots, and that's just for the mail-in. If it was in person, then there'd be another level of that too. And I agree that there are cost savings from it because it's mainly poll workers on election day. Presumably the lines would be shorter and so whether it's I don't know if it's an offset or not. I totally agree. In many ways, I think this discussion is moot because I don't think this is the real reason why people resist early voting. And I don't think it's all just political either. I think there's legitimate concerns about, I was just reading that Montana does a lot of early voting. And, and this is a kind of a scare story, but they elected someone because of early voting who committed a crime because everybody cast their vote early and they didn't find out about the crime until it was too late. So there's an incomplete information issue. There is you're asking people to vote at a time of low interest. This sort of just get it out of the way idea cheapens the vote. People don't like that. People want to think of voting not just as, a right, but something that has an awesome responsibility you're supposed to take seriously. And anything that makes voting extremely easy to do, people push back on that because they think it cheapens it. As one scholar put it, when voting becomes easier, more people vote who are less engaged in politics. So you have to ask the question in some ways, what is the cost to the quality of the voter if you make voting just an automatic, easy thing to do? People right now who pay a price to vote, presumably, and we know this is true from studies, are more engaged, they're more informed, they know more about politics, they care more. People who vote, and I don't know of any studies about comparing early voters with election day voters, but just generally those who are least likely, for example, to get registered on time, those are more likely to be low information voters. This is one of the things that affects students. The group who has the least stake, at least right now, in the outcome, the more self-focused, fewer dependents upon them, are also the ones who are least likely to vote and least likely to care about voting. And we have to ask the question, is that so bad? Until they become informed.
Yes.
Several years ago, I did a presentation to a civic group in another part of the state. And I hadn't thought about this one thing that one of the circuit clerks came up and told me. I'll tell you some of the things we're doing. I'm from Loire County, but in this county, in the county she was from, and she knew all the circuit clerks in the state. Some of the areas in the state have a circuit clerk and that circuit clerk's office, and that's it. They don't have personnel to help them. Okay, so she was saying that all this other extra work on them would increase their time on task. Okay, so I didn't know that, but if you think about all the different places of circuit clerks and then think about the size of the population, I went and checked on it. Check the population in that area. It could be right. Okay, and the other thing is, I've never considered, they give you a window in which you can vote. When it starts and when it ends and whatever. Okay, we have done this for years. First, because we were working out of town, and we needed to vote early. Okay, and you're right, sometimes we weren't working out of town, we were going shopping. But we were out of town. Okay, the other one is, now we don't have to worry about that. We're over 65. Nobody ever argues with you when you're over 65. All you have to do is show them your ID. So I think that is given some of the people some of the people that had trouble getting to the circuit clerk, I could see that. But I know one case where the circuit clerk knew that person couldn't make it to the poll. They were close enough to the circuit clerk's office, they were gonna come to the person's house and help her vote. Okay. So, I'm in Lamar County again. They've been very helpful. So, part of it is, when you set up too rigid of rules, then you do block out some people from voting, because they say, oh, can't do that. Some people think in terms of can't. I usually think in terms of yes. You know, if I'm gonna vote and I'm gonna be out of town, I can make sure I'm gonna be out of town. Okay? And I know people that, like the election commissioners, don't like that, but that's life. If you can't vote when I wanna vote, I'm gonna vote every year. I have voted every year since I was in West Virginia, since I've been 21. They held the courthouse circuit clerk's office open so that I can come and register on the day of my birthday. But the thing is, you're right, the League of Women Voters, we had to register somebody to vote that was 65 years old, and her daughter was in her late 40s, because they never voted. But they had just decided that year that they had somebody they wanted to vote for, and they wanted to register to vote. So there's all kinds of reasons why.
Good point.
Yeah.
Any questions?
Yes, we have a few more questions. Panelists, what are your thoughts about voting online, especially considering that we pay our bills online?
That's not
They already told you. Great idea, I read it.
I'm a computer.
You wanna answer that? So next time?
I personally think it's a great idea to be able to vote online.
Fair enough.
He's going to abstain.
Short and sweet. This is a question regarding voter ID. Should you ensure that the way your name is listed on the state voter roll matches the ID card that you present?
Well, I would say if a person came in and if I'm Johneice Gowdy, my name on my license is Gowdy. The voter roll has it Goudy. I think that person should be able to vote just by working, since I've been working down there, I've seen so much stuff. We're all human. Sometimes the mistake could be with the clerk's office. If they see Johneice Gowdy, and they know, and then they just type Goudy, when actually it should have been Gowdy. I think that person should be able to go ahead and vote. If the birth date match, the last numbers of the social security matches, everything matches, I think that person should be able to vote.
And may I add something to that, only because I went and voted today. My ID, the young lady was writing down Deborah Chambers Gambrell. I go, that's not my name. Well, that's how they got it on your license. I said, because the buffoons that did my license couldn't figure out how to write my own name. I voted in the McLaurin precinct. You can go online. I made her do it right there. She said, oh yeah, you right here, you are. I go, okay then. But if I had not caught what she was writing down and gone ahead and voted and left the building, there might have been a problem. So it's just like Johneice said, when you see a discrepancy, notice it right there. While I'm talking, let me say this. Watch the machines. I voted today. There were 3 out-of-order machines. I've been voting and running for office 40-something years in this county, so I think I know voting up and down. All the presidential candidates on the left side of the ballot. Everybody else is on the other side. Well, I finished the president, and I went to the other side, and the presidential pick started changing. I go, what the heck? So I went over to my husband. He was just doing fine. I go, hold up. I got a terminal 3. I have to figure out how to make this work. And I did it again. Went back, cleared out the presidential side, did it again, came back, hit something, and it went down to the 4th person on the, and I said, hold up. Somebody come over here right now. And they came over. I said, there's something wrong with this machine. I'm recognizing what's happening. for somebody whose vision may be a little worse than mine, and mine is really bad, this thing is, well, we have been having some glitches. Don't hit the square, hit the name. And I go, okay. Do you know the average person who goes in to vote electronically is told to hit the box?
That's right.
Now you're telling me, my husband said, just hit the name, please. So I did, and it worked. So when I finished, I didn't leave it alone. I went back to the clerk's desk, I said, y'all, I'm not really being ugly, but you need to really go check machine number, whatever, because somebody who might not vote as much as I do might have difficulty and give up and just say, oh, if I'm gonna hit this and it's gonna do this, I'm just done. Print the ballot and let me know.
And I think, and I want to go on to the next question, but I think the important thing here to learn is that everything is issues. If we don't have any early voting, it's gonna be issues, but what we have to really talk about, I'd like to talk about, is the importance and value of early voting despite all the stumbling blocks.
There are some counties that actually hire computer people to check out the equipment every time a vote is going on. So that when they start the voting, they're assured that the machines are working, because they know how to check it. But if you don't, you have to check those computers.
You should,
It's a computer.
Now, we've been doing that. A group came down from Jackson, so we've been working on all those machines. We've been doing that all last week, and then we started back this week. So we have been doing that, but that doesn't say it's not going to happen, because it did. And I did not know that you had to press the person's
I had
name.
to look through the name to make the right side of the ballot work.
But that's good you're looking into it.
Yeah, first thing in the morning.
Yeah.
Yes, sir, here on the front row.
Yeah, that was my question that I asked about the voter, the matching of the two. And the reason that came to me is one time when I voted, the way they have my name on the roll is not what's on my driver's license. So I don't give them my driver's license, I give them my military ID card, which matches what they have. Well, the gentleman didn't want to take my ID card, my military ID card. They said any government issued ID card, that's government issued. Because he didn't know how to read that or something. I said, well, this is the ID I'm presenting. So it was inconvenient for him, so he was going to tell me what I was going to give him. But I didn't want to give him that because I didn't want the problem of my name not matching. They throw my vote out. And so he had to take it because I wasn't going to present anything else. But my point is sometimes you have to take care of yourself, not let them tell you what you're going to do. As long as whatever you're doing is legal and they said it's legal, I'm sorry if it's inconvenient for them. Go get somebody else who can read this card. But this is a valid card. And so, we can't just fall into this trap of, well, they're the authority because they're sitting behind the desk at the moment. They may not be. And so take care of your own vote. That's all I wanted to say.
You should be able to use an affidavit ballot if you go.
But I didn't
vote.
need an affidavit ballot.
Right.
I had an ID.
Right, I'm just saying, if your name does not match, your ID does not match the roll roster, you can fill out an affidavit ballot at the site. I've had.
And you know what?
And then you have to go to the circuit court.
Yeah.
5 days, and a lot of times people are not going to do. I personally don't like the affidavit ballot. I really don't. If a person comes to vote, and we've been having poll workers training for the last couple of months. And so what I tell my poll workers, the people that are working with District 2, is to use common sense. Let's just use it. And they said that in our meetings when we went to a training for the election commissioners. They tell your people to use common sense. If I was Johneice Dupree last election, this election, I'm Johnny Dupree. I've transitioned. So don't make me vote affidavit just because I've transitioned. No, I'm Johnny now. I was Johneice 4 years ago, but I'm Johneice now. So.
Linda, question.
Well, it's not really a question, it kind of is that maybe Judge Gambrell might know. My husband and I voted early. And the ballot for the president was this long.
On the left side.
Yeah, on the left. And my comment is, where do all these people, question, where do all these people come from? I looked up one of the names, that was, ethnic, Sandy. And this man was born in India. His parents were born in India. I'm sure he's an American citizen, I'm not saying, but he wasn't born here, so he can't be president. And he was thrown off the ballot in other states because of that. Like New Jersey was one, I don't remember the others. But why does Mississippi have him on the ballot? And my comment about that is that until we all shame the people up there in Jackson that we're tired of being 50 and 48 and 49, our kids don't even know. I have a granddaughter that just is going to Ole Miss. She had to ask me when I talked about dictators, Nana, what's a dictator? 18 years old, an A student, didn't know what a dictator is. So my thing is, this is all good. Early voting, not early voting. We're not gonna get it doing this because those people in Jackson don't want it. And if we want it, we gotta shame those people in Jackson why we're still low, so low on the totem pole. I've been here 55 years in April. And it really hasn't changed much. So that's all my comment, because I let the people in the motor vehicles know this. Everybody's sitting there heard this.
So I'll just say that we hire and fire at the polls. We hire and fire at the polls.
Can I say something? What does it take to get that on the ballot? The number of signatures, I know sometimes we go out and get thousands of signatures, and it gets it on the ballot so that we can vote, yea or nay.
I didn't hear your question.
He asked, what does it take to get a citizens initiative put on the ballot, an amendment put on the ballot, where you could, I guess, to get early voting?
Yes.
Yeah, it's a pretty high threshold in Mississippi. In some states, it's easy to get citizen initiatives on there, but for ours, I believe you have to get some, like 15% or so of registered voters in the state to sign several months in advance, requesting that be placed on the ballot, and then it'll be put there for a up or down vote. That's how the flag was changed, for instance.
But isn't that based on congressional districts too? That was a legal issue that went before the state.
Yes, yes, it is, yeah.
And we don't even have a process.
Yeah, we
now.
don't have a process right now.
Yeah, and it's a higher petition threshold
And
here.
that was done for political reasons, to allow that, have that complication, so it would be filled out.
So you can't get it on the ballot, that's your ballot.
We just need Peg to work her magic
I'm a native
up in
Mississippi, trying to say
Jackson.
this, we're
Convince
50,
those
we work hard to
legislatures.
stay 50.
That's correct, that's just like Shepard said.
Christy, what you said?
I said, we just need you to work your magic up there in Jackson and convince everyone. You've been lobbying up there, right?
And just for clarification, according to the Secretary of State's website, after registering the initiative in the Secretary of State's office, the official ballot title and summary are prepared by the Mississippi Attorney General. Initiatives are only valid for 1 year, during which time a petition must be circulated to gather signatures to place the measure on the next statewide general election ballot. According to state laws interpreted, yada yada, down the bottom, a minimum of 106,190 certified signatures must be gathered from the congressional districts as they exist at the time a petition is presented for approval. No more than 20% of signatures of qualified electors may come from a single congressional district. So it would be almost about 106,000 signatures.
The one thing they didn't think of, if you move and change your address, I've seen it turned away from the polls. I didn't see it in the circuit clerk, they should be able to take care of that, but if the polls, different places, In
in the precincts.
they turned the person away and said, you couldn't vote at that box. You have to go to the box where the address was. He said, I don't live there anymore. So I don't know what he did when he left.
Well, he can do an affidavit. Then you do an affidavit.
But
You cannot deny anybody's right to vote.
Before we move on to the last questions, this would be a good one to wrap things up. Are there any other questions from the audience at this time? Okay, wonderful. Well, panelists, is it important to fight for early voting in Mississippi? Is our final question of the evening. Is it important to fight for early voting in Mississippi? Is it important?
Yes.
Short answer.
I'm just trying to give the facts about it. That's a value-laden answer. Yeah.
We appreciate your insight.
I would like to say one thing before we, go ahead, I'm sorry.
I was just gonna say, I think probably my advocacy is more related to online voter registration. I think that is where we're gonna see huge impacts. But then you gotta do the education, you gotta get out the vote. So it's all important. We'll just put it like that.
And voter education is so important because some of the poll workers that have been working the polls for years don't know some of the stuff. And I guess from life experiences, I've learned stuff, and I was sharing things, and they said, well, I didn't know that. And then I'm thinking, we need to do some voter education. I don't know how, I don't know where to start, but I just know that it's important. And lastly, I'd like to say that someone sent my husband a text last night, and the text said, when you go to vote, if the poll worker writes anything on your ballot, don't accept it. Now, I don't know where that came from, but the poll worker would have to initial that ballot, because if that ballot is not initiated by that poll worker, the ballot does not count. I can go in and do everything right, but if that poll worker does not initiate that ballot does not count. Now, I don't know where that came from, but just get that word out, that there's no validity to that. If a person goes to vote, that poll worker, and that person is called the ballot manager or the initialing manager. That ballot has to be verified, because somebody could come in and steal a ballot and go vote. But it's got to be initiated by the poll, by that ballot manager or the initiating ballot. So just let the people know that it's no validity to that. Don't go trying to get another ballot or raise havoc because the poll worker signed it or initiated it.
And that's the initialing they do before they hand it to you.
Exactly.
To actually take it to the machine to vote.
Exactly. They have to initial it and grade it.
Wonderful. Okay, well, if we have no other questions for the evening, first of all, I'd just like to thank you all for attending this evening. I really do appreciate you coming here and being part of this conversation. You have a question, sir?
I'd like to make a statement. I heard the question as to why, and it's simple. There is a fear if we give people too much freedom that it will affect my employment. Mississippi, the closed society, killed people for the right who attempt to register to vote. We're coming out of that climate now. So half of the state was free, the other half was not free. A third of my life, I was not free to vote. I've been free to vote now for like 61 years. Put the math together, they give my age away. But the bottom line is fear. We come from the same Mississippi, and I'm repeating, Mississippi is a closed society. All of the privileged free have the opportunity to vote. Now it's being open, and this is a good thing, that we make sure that we open up the society to everybody. So it's going to be a learning process. We've got a lot of catching up to do.
Yes,
Can I make an announcement?
Yes, sir.
On November the 3rd, in Town Square Park, from 5 until 6, so we can get past football before that. We're gonna have a non-denominational, non-partisan prayer vigil. The purpose of it is to vote for the city, the county, the state, all that. But also to vote for the election process. And also vote for the person, whomever that may be, man or woman, that person will vote according, I said, the way God would do, or a sensible person would govern. Lamar County, Forrest County, Jones County, Perry County is coming here, Town Square Park. We got Hancock County, Jackson County, Harrison County. We know that they're doing it there. And we would like for all the cities to do it 5 to 6, or 5 to 3, 5 to 5 to whatever, for that 1 hour. On the 3rd, at the same time, as power. And we would like for everybody, and we invite everybody to come. We'll have a couple of songs. We'll have every denomination that we can. We got Baptist, Methodist, Catholic, Muslim. If we could find somebody here that had faith, if we could find somebody who would come to pray, because we're not trying to marginalize anybody. Because we got this what they call melting pot, and we just need to respect everybody for where they come from. And so we're doing that, and hopefully if you get past the Saints playing before or after, you can come down there and join us for an hour.
Absolutely. Well, thank you to all who had comments today. Thank you for sharing your perspectives. Thank you for those of you that had questions. We do really appreciate you helping to facilitate this conversation. And we'd like to say a special thank you to all of our panelists. Thank you so much for sharing your time.
Also to close, I'd like to thank our panelists so much for coming. You've added to the evening, but I also want to say that what I learned tonight, what I've known, because I also work as a lobbyist for the league up in Jackson, and I have become so much more aware, and what tonight is doing for me, and I hope for everybody, is to become more aware of the problems that we need to work on in this state. In January, there were 15 bills proposed in the legislature to affect voting, and they all passed. The League of Women Voters, NAACP, Mississippi Votes, we are all involved in litigation trying to work with voting issues. And it is more than just early voting, it's mail-in voting, it's many, many issues that we need to work on. And what I would like us to do in the future is, if we can, is to have more meetings like this where we can talk and figure out what's going on, what we need to work on, and then to work on it. Because this is a great state. I've told everyone, I've lived in many, many places, and I've never met so many people who were friendly, and I love it. But at the same time, I understand that all of us here, each of us, can make a difference. And we are making, these nonpartisan groups, the league, we are making tiny little differences in Jackson. But we need the help of everybody, and not just for what we need, most importantly, is for you to talk to us so we can learn what the problems are and improve our state. Thank you so much for coming out tonight, and thank you to the panelists for being here.